You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
The theory of quantum mechanics is strange. Richard Feynman, perhaps the most famous physicist of the 20th century, said, "I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics." Certain aspects of this strangeness have led a number of eminent physicists to believe that consciousness must play a part in creating our reality. How this could be is not well defined, and the great majority of physicists reject this idea. The legendary physicist John Wheeler was one of these who believed that consciousness plays a fundamental role in creating our reality. He called this idea the participatory universe. He died without answering what he considered his final question regarding his participatory universe. How come existence? He may have meant what mechanism created this reality. I like to imagine that he meant, if consciousness is co-creating this reality, why? Wheeler believed consciousness participated in the creation of reality. He did not feel he had an answer to how. He suggested an answer might lie in a combination of physics and information theory. The answers that I propose are different, but generally consistent with Wheeler's viewpoint. Wheeler suspected that most of the universe consists of huge clouds of uncertainty that have not yet interacted either with a conscious observer or even with some lump of inanimate matter. Exactly what a cloud of uncertainty means is not defined. I want to propose potential general answers to these questions. In this video, how can consciousness create this reality? In the next video, the much more speculative question, for what purpose would such consciousness do so? Quantum mechanics is a physical theory that defines the probabilities of the different possible outcomes of an evolving subatomic system. If enough information were available about the current and past universe, quantum mechanics could conceptually describe the probability of every possible thing that could happen in every possible universe. This idea of the mathematics of quantum mechanics, having all information about the probabilities of everything that could possibly happen in any possible universe, was called the universal wave function by QWF, its inventor. This is a conceptual extension of one form of the actual solution to quantum mechanics, the quantum wave function, the QWF. There is a virtually infinite number of potential outcomes in the QWF, and so there is a virtually infinite number of possible universes that are consistent with the QWF. The question of how we experience only this one specific outcome as our reality is called the measurement problem. Out of the essentially infinite possible realities reflected in the QWF, how and why do we experience this one only? This problem has never been solved in a way that the majority of physicists accept. Everett's universal wave function is just a generalized idea of the quantum wave function, the QWF. The QWF is the actual solution describing real systems. I will use the term the QWF as the general term referring to both. Of the still unanswered questions about the meaning of quantum mechanics, probably the most important is this: does consciousness select our specific reality from the infinite potential of the quantum wave function? Or does some other mechanism determine what we experience as our reality? There are more than 15 different interpretations of what the mathematics of quantum mechanics mean. All attempt to answer the measurement problem in different ways. Most do not assume consciousness has any role in selecting our reality or collapsing the QWF. The most popular interpretations among physicists are the Copenhagen interpretation and the many worlds interpretation. Some early framers of the Copenhagen interpretation did think that consciousness was needed to collapse the QWF and create our reality. But most today that embrace this interpretation do not believe that consciousness plays a part. The many worlds interpretation avoids the question of what collapses the QWF into our specific reality by assuming it does not collapse at all. Every moment, the universe splits into a virtually infinite number of new, almost identical universes. Many worlds assumes that every possible universe consistent with a QWF actually exists, but in a way such that we can never observe or interact with those virtually infinite worlds or universes. For most physicists, the idea that human consciousness could impact the physical universe is a non-starter. For one thing, the universe is 14 billion years old. How could our thoughts, for example, affect the formation of the planets 4.6 billion years ago? The assumptions made to solve the measurement problem are wide-ranging and pretty wild. As mentioned, many worlds assumes the QWF does not collapse. Therefore, there exists an almost infinite set of universes, many almost exactly like our own, all impossible for us to observe or interact with. For example, there is one exactly like our own, except where I misspelled where as where. Another interpretation assumes that time can go backwards. One assumes that every particle has a pilot wave that guides it, but that, like the many worlds, can never be detected. Think about this. Some physicists think there are an infinite number of universes, many with exact copies of you and me. Some think the universe itself is conscious, or our consciousness co-creates reality. Some think reality is still just clockwork. Not one interpretation is accepted by a majority of physicists. This is a remarkable situation for such a fundamental theory that describes our experienced reality. There is no other realm of scientific theory that has this situation, where a successful, totally accepted theory spawns an array of wildly different interpretations of what it means, all by respected experts. General relativity, particle physics, evolutionary biology. None of these experience these kinds of intellectual bar fights. Surfing the QWF. There is a way of looking at quantum mechanics that resolves all the paradoxes and reconciles the array of interpretations. That way is if the mathematics of the QWF is all there is in 4 dimensions. If the space, time, matter, and energy that we experience are simply characteristics of the mathematics, characteristics that our consciousness can perceive. In other words, if our experience of this reality is analogous to a first-person video game in a virtual reality, but one entirely based on the laws of physics. If our consciousness is a higher dimensional phenomenon, and our reality is simply our higher dimensional consciousness experiencing those mathematics, reading, viewing, calculating, short, specific threads within the QWF. Every paradox in quantum mechanics ultimately results from the measurement problem. Most interpretations fail in their attempts to reconcile the mathematics of quantum mechanics with our implicit definition of reality. If reality is simply our perception of a specific thread of the mathematics of the QWF, there is no measurement problem, and there are no paradoxes. In a material realist reality, where mind is an epiphenomena of matter, it's a mystery how consciousness could impact QWF collapse. But in surfing the quiff, mind collapsing the quiff, in other words, selecting a specific thread of the quiff to follow, is the only reality. Note, this isn't really changing the quiff. It is just changing our perception of it. How could this be right? How could this immense 15 billion-year-old universe be all in our head? There are a couple layers to this answer. The first layer involves a definition and a weak joke. We know, ogres have layers too, donkey. Solipsism is a theory in philosophy that your own existence is the only thing that is real, or that can be known. A disillusioned existentialist walks into a bar and asks, is it solipsistic in this universe, or is it just me? I'm not suggesting that the universe is all in my head, or all in your head, but I am suggesting that it is kind of all in all of our heads. Remember the question, how could our thoughts affect the formation of the planets 4.6 billion years ago? This is how. Imagine we can watch a model of weather on Earth. We can go back and forth in the time direction and observe conditions at any time point for any of the possible time evolutions. In one group of possible evolutions, massive volcanoes created nuclear winter and killed off almost all life. If we select a time point in an evolution that has humans alive, then the past of that point in that evolution cannot include any killer volcanoes. Similarly, if we choose to live a life as a human on Earth, then in the past of that point, planets had to have formed. By selecting the quiff thread, we select the past that comprises that thread. Wheeler said that the past has no existence except as recorded in the present, and that the universe does not exist out there independent of all acts of observation. The second layer includes more of John Wheeler. His participatory universe idea included an idea he called it from bit. Essentially, he meant that the universe is only data, and that we can only know this data by asking yes or no questions. His yes or no questions include our senses of sight, smell, feeling, hearing, and taste. Nothing that we know of the universe can be known other than through these senses. Our instruments, our experiments, our model of the world, all come by way of these senses and in no other way. Does this mean the universe is like the movie The Matrix, and we can take a red pill and fly and bend bullet trajectories? Unfortunately, or maybe very fortunately, not. I, for one, wouldn't want to wake up where that red pill took me. If our entire reality is experiencing the mathematics of physics, then everything we experience must conform to those laws of physics. In a world filled with spiritual and religious belief, apparent miracles, NDEs, side effects like distant viewing, how can these be reconciled? Quantum mechanics only calculates probabilities, not certainties. There is lots of room in improbable outcomes for high degrees of strangeness. But they are improbable, and that word does mean what we think it means. Their occurrence is rare. The next video will look at how improbable outcomes may tie to why we are surfing this quiff.